From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
All right, good?
Yep.
All right. 3, 2, and 1. From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazende. That is Andre Johnson Jr. You notice the introduction is a little different today because this is an emergency pod. We're not going to go through the whole spiel, but just on YouTube right now because of the Friday news dump, the Friday bombshell that is Derek Carr potentially season in jeopardy with a shoulder injury. First reported by Ian Rappaport. It has since been confirmed by myself and Jeff Duncan and some others. So it is now a situation now, Andre Johnson Jr., where the Saints do not know what's going to happen at their quarterback position in 2025. I know you stepped back in. You were technically off today. You came back in. You texted me, hey, should we do an emergency pod? So you're here, so we appreciate that. What were your initial thoughts?
Wow, was my initial thoughts. Like many of the people who saw it, I mean, and when you see that, it kind of, you had the feeling that whether you like Derek Carr, whether you hate Derek Carr, the Saints had the answer at quarterback for at least one more season. Now, the rush to get a quarterback, it's on. I mean, the urgency to find your signal caller, it's up by so many levels now, whether that's in the draft, whether you're looking at somebody in free agency, and I'm sure you will go through some of the names today. The urgency to get a quarterback is on now because Derek Carr might not be there.
And look, you can like Carr, you can love Carr, you can hate Carr. The bottom line is this. The way the Saints were currently constructed for 2025, he gave you the best chance to win, regardless of who they could be drafting in a couple of weeks, regardless of who else they have on the roster, who the fans prefer. It doesn't matter.
And that's not just us saying that. That's people on the team, including Cam Jordan.
Including Cam Jordan, who just recently said, give me a healthy Derek Carr for 17 games and we'll see what we can do. Well, I don't know if that's going to happen because he's definitely dealing with some kind of shoulder issue. Now, there are a couple things we got to sort through. First off, just the weird vibes between Derek Carr and the organization this entire offseason, from, the not taking a pay cut to, moved his family out to Fresno, the hiring of Kellen Moore, the lukewarm positive comments from Kellen Moore initially, but then felt like momentum was building towards, okay, this is how it's going to go. Then the restructured contract, the silence from Derek Carr just in terms of his acknowledgement of the situation with the New Orleans Saints, the reports about him wanting to be traded or open to a trade or open to testing the market. To now this, a couple of days before they start their off-season workout program, April 14th. So, look, this leads to a lot of questions. First off, what happened? We know it's a shoulder injury. That's all we've been able to confirm. Is it a torn? Is it a tear? Is it a labrum? Is it a rotator cuff? When did it happen? Diana Rossini reported that the Saints were not surprised by this news. So it did not happen at 3:58 p.m. on Friday. Let's put it that way. When the initial report came out, they have obviously known about this for at least some time. I doubt they found out just about this today.
Right.
How did it happen? What happened? How did he hurt himself? And then where? All those legitimate questions will hopefully be answered in due time. And this is all in the mix of an offseason where they made a big move to restructure Derek Carr, something we all thought was going to happen. But now you made the restructure, you got the cap space because you felt like, look, regardless of the kind of weird situation, how it's not going great, he still gave you the best chance to win, and you had the salary cap space, but now you may not even get him. Boy, what wild, wild times. And when we talked about Derek Carr at the end of the season, and I've been much like y'all. If you're watching this pod, I've been way more on Team Carr than not. He hasn't been a perfect quarterback by any means, but we've all acknowledged where we feel about Derek Carr. But the one thing that's been bothering me, and it had nothing to do with getting in arguments with teammates. It had nothing to do with fans hating him. The one thing that was starting to get concerning about Derek Carr: durability. A guy that had no durability concerns coming into New Orleans, all of a sudden is starting to catch a lot of injuries. He exited 3 games in 2023. We saw that. He missed 7 games this year and exited how many others? 2?
Yeah.
Obviously, they were 0-7 without him. So sometimes when a player hits that 30s wall, even when they're very durable, this happened to Drew at the end of his career, sometimes those injuries become contagious, and now all of a sudden you have a situation where Derek Carr, like it or not, he was the face of the franchise because he's the star quarterback, or he's the starting quarterback, could potentially be out for 2025, which brings us to this, Andre. What do the Saints do now? You got any ideas?
Oh, my idea is what my idea has been over the last couple of weeks. New Shedeur Orleans, Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I said already, if Shedeur is there at 9, you take Shedeur Sanders. I was even open to potentially trading up if he starts to fall and getting Shedeur if you get to trade up without giving up next year's first-round pick. Now the urgency to get a quarterback is even higher than it was the last time we had this conversation. I think if a quarterback like Shedeur Sanders falls to 9, somebody who is supremely accurate, somebody who plays with anticipation, somebody who's got the swag, the moxie of a starting quarterback in the league, somebody who will put butts in seats in the Superdome and give fans a reason to be excited. At number 9, we talked about best player versus need. If Carr can't play next season, your number one need is now a quarterback.
Without question.
So I think your best player and your best need comes together and says Shedeur Sanders at 9. That's got to be the plan for the New Orleans Saints.
And that's going to be an interesting scenario because depending on what you read, what you watch, what you see, there is a likelihood that Shedeur could be available at 9. Now, this news, how does that shake things up? Does that now all of a sudden shift things up for the Browns who, maybe thought, maybe we'll trade back in mid-first round and grab him? Does that change things with the Giants who may have had the same sort of plan of attack? Mm-hmm. But the Saints, Derek Carr going down, it's really 2 quarterbacks down now because the way your quarterback room is currently constructed with Derek Carr, Spencer Rattler, Jay Kaner, and Ben DiNucci. Okay, so if you take Derek Carr out of the mix, you draft a quarterback regardless. I don't know if it's going to be first round or it's going to be second round, but I do know this. You're going to draft a quarterback higher than you anticipate. By the way, this is the first time the Saints have been in an obvious position like this since we've been alive. I mean, they've never had the obvious, you got to get the quarterback 2 weeks before the draft. Now they do. But also this, if you take Carr out of the mix and you add a rookie in, they're not just going to have a rookie, Rattler, and Haener, at least not in my opinion, rolling for the season. To me, I don't think that happens. So I honestly think in that scenario, you're honestly going to look for or try to look for a competent veteran quarterback that can keep you afloat until a rookie's ready or if they want to roll with Rattler. But you're not just going to roll with basically a rookie, an inexperienced third-year guy in Jay Kaner with 1 start, and a second-year pro that went 0-6 or 0-7 in Spencer Rattler, even though he showed some good things. So now you look at the draft, but you also got to look at the free agent market. And now, shall I read you the names of free agents that are available? Okay, how about this list? Desmond Ridder, Teddy Bridgewater, Easton Stick, Tyler Huntley,
all right,
C.J. Beathard, and wait for it. Wait for it.
Don't say it.
Aaron Rodgers.
Ugh.
So, if you are the New Orleans Saints and you truly want to compete, does the Derek Carr injury now change that big picture approach? And now you're just thinking, okay, 2025 is going to be the transitional year that we all had expected at some point. You don't tank, but it's not going to be good because you just have so much inexperience. Or do you try to make some kind of move to get a competent veteran starting quarterback? Of that list, obviously, Aaron Rodgers is the only one. Maybe Teddy Bridgewater can come in, but I think at this stage of his career, he's comfortable backup. He can give you some time as a starter. And at some point, maybe you hand the job over to either Rattler or whoever the rookie quarterback is. Tyler Huntley's another one. Do you make a trade for Kirk Cousins?
Whew. Then you'd have to deal with the Atlanta Falcons.
It's very hard to trade within the division. Even harder to trade within the division at that position.
Mm-hmm.
My point to you is this. This is bad, my friend. This is not a good situation for the Saints to be in. And it just really puts the exclamation point on just a totally weird and odd offseason between the New Orleans Saints, the new coaching staff, and their quarterback.
Yeah, and you named a couple of the free agents. I'm not big on Aaron Rodgers at all. I think at this stage of his career, he's more of a hindrance to a team than an aid to a team. And we saw that when he went to the New York Jets, who at the time were a young team full of bright potential. And within 2 seasons, he brought them to the bottom of the NFL. I don't think he can do much for this New Orleans Saints team. Teddy Bridgewater might be interesting, but a lot of the people who were pro Teddy within that organization are gone now. But
it's been a long time since he started games.
Exactly, it's been a long time since you've had to rely on Teddy. I don't think any of those guys would be someone who you would rely on from week 1 to week 18. Maybe somebody to start for the first month of the season and eventually pass the keys down to a rookie. So my first thought was Shedeur Sanders. My second thought was, is the answer on this roster? As you look on the roster, we know Spencer Rattler, that was Clint Kubiak's guy, not Kellen Moore's guy. Jake Haener, taking a year back, was Pete Carmichael's guy, not Kellen Moore's guy. So now Kellen Moore, before he even gets to the draft, you've got to look on your roster and say, is the answer on this roster? And he was kind of complimentary of Rattler at the NFL owners meetings where, he talked about being interested to see what steps he could take from year 1 to year 2. And he kind of talked about how fast year 1 can move for a young quarterback and how it starts to slow down in year 2. So I'm curious on if Kellen Moore truly believes a potential answer for the Saints is already on the roster. I do not. I saw what we got out of Rattler last year, 0-7 in the games that he played, 0-6 if you don't count the game against the Washington where he came in, at halftime. But I don't think Rattler was wholly impressive last year, and you can make a bunch of excuses. Oh, injuries this, injuries that.
The truth is,
look at the game. He did not scream ready to start in the NFL. Jake Haener, in the limited opportunities that he got, he was not ready. He did have one chance against Washington to start, and he lasted all of, 13 pass attempts?
It wasn't long. It wasn't long. It wasn't pretty.
So, I don't think the answer's on this roster, but I'm curious to see, do you think the answer could be on this roster right now?
No. It's currently constructed. With you talk about with or without a draft pick?
Without a draft pick right now. Do you think Rattler or
No.
Haener's
I think if they did that, they would be playing for next year's quarterback class in that situation. If that is the plan, and then you'd be pleasantly surprised if all of a sudden you see a huge jump from Spencer Rattler. So, no, they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't just say, oh, okay, Derek Carr is out. We're just going to go ahead and roll with Rattler and Haener the rest of the season. They wouldn't do that. They would add a veteran and a draft pick. The question I have is, okay, we know you're high on Shedeur Sanders, and I have him as the second highest graded quarterback in this class. Number 3, Jackson Dart. What if it's all a big smoke screen, which is certainly possible, and he's gone by pick 5 or pick 4? Then what do you do? Because if you're the Saints at 9, you are in desperate need of a quarterback. Do you reach? Do you wait? Maybe you reach in round 2 for a third-round graded guy, but still that does nothing for how competent do you want to be in the season if we're going to rely on the plan of a guy that hasn't won a game yet in last year's 5th-round pick, and in that hypothetical situation, a 2nd or a 3rd-round pick, and a guy that lasted 1 half in his only start. You got to bring in a veteran. Yeah. So I think if this turns out to be he can't go and he's going to miss either the entire season or a significant portion of the season, I think you're going to see 2 additions to the Saints quarterback room before the season starts.
I agree because, we had a podcast about Jackson Dart. I cannot wrap my mind around picking Jackson Dart at number 9. Maybe if he's there at round 2, but I feel like if you pick Jackson Dart at number 9, you're going to end up in a similar situation that the Arizona Cardinals did a few years ago, where they drafted Josh Rosen. I believe he was 10th overall, and by the next season, they had the top overall draft pick, and they wound up drafting another quarterback in Kyler Murray, and they sent Josh Rosen to the curb. And for the Saints, I think it's probably unlikely that they pick 2 quarterbacks in back-to-back first rounds, seeing that they haven't picked a quarterback in the first round since the 1970s. So
early 1970s.
Exactly. So I think Shedeur's the guy. I don't think Jackson Dart's the guy. If you can't get Shedeur Sanders, obviously Cam Ward's going to be gone. I think you take your chances with those middle-of-the-pack quarterbacks, the guys who we talked about as the best of the rest. Tyler Shuck being an option.
Tyler Shuck, he was on a visit today, according to Jeff Duncan.
Right, Jeff Duncan said he was doing a top 30 visit with the Saints today, so he's somebody who's kind of emerged as an option. They had a visit with Jalen Milroe recently. They've talked to Quinn Ewers. So, guys in that ballpark, that's where you start looking. You bring in one of those guys, you bring in a veteran, and you have a true battle royale in training camp to see who comes out as the best quarterback for the season.
Honestly, man, I think that's what ultimately happens. I think that's ultimately where I think that's where it would ultimately go. I just do. That's where my gut instinct would be to tell me is kind of that next tier. They've done most of the work on those next tier of guys, from Jackson Dart to Tyler Shuck to Quinn Ewers to Jalen Milroe to Kyle McCord, and then you bring them in the mix. You bring a veteran in the mix, and somebody gonna be going after that because you're gonna have 4 quarterbacks all the way to the start of training camp. Or to the start of the regular season. By the way, they had 4 quarterbacks going to training camp last year. That didn't work. That was weird the way the reps were divvied up. So this is a situation where, my goodness, and also this. Let's not lose sight of this. If Derek Carr is truly out for the year, can't go, his days as a Saint are over. His days as a Saint. He's not coming back in 2026. I think his days as a Saint at that point would be done. And
he would go down, unfortunately, as one of the biggest failed experiments in New Orleans Saints history. I mean, I don't know if you could call him a bust because he's not, he wasn't drafted. But when it comes to a guy who came in with expectations, I mean, with the state that the NFC South was when Derek Carr got here, the belief was this guy can take us to the next level. He can give us more than Andy Dalton was giving us before, more than Jameis Winston was giving us before. Tom Brady is gone. We can get to the playoffs with Derek Carr, and seeing that never happened. And then this year, where the players at least still believe the window's open, Carr potentially cannot play because of a shoulder injury. Not to mention the general consensus of the Who Dat Nation and how the fans feel about Carr. He might go down as one of the biggest disappointments in Saints history.
Initially, I think that would be the reaction. But once everything settles down, I think it was a guy that came in 14-13 as a starter, got crushed with injuries, and it just was not a fit. But you spent $150 million or whatever it is. And then, honestly, man, like if this was an issue, that's why when they found out when this happened is so important, because if it happened, if you knew about this before the restructure, that makes absolutely no sense.
Exactly. That's when you said that they knew already. I'm like, well, when did they find out? Because I don't think you restructure a guy like they did if you have knowledge that he potentially cannot play in the upcoming season.
Oof. This was going to be an easy Friday. You were off. You were hanging out at the French Quarter Fest. I was at French Quarter Fest.
It was one of my friend's birthdays. We hanging out. We were eating pizza, walking around. And all of a sudden, I get the push alert, and I'm like, yeah, guys, I might have to go.
And then I got, I'm thinking it's going to be an easy Friday, and then all of a sudden, boom, it explodes. So, all right, we're going to wrap it up for now. I know it was a little early, but this is an emergency pod just on YouTube. So, we'll be back Monday. Tune in to the Final Play Sunday, whatever the latest is between now and then. I'll do my best to relay all that information on the Final Play Sunday night at 10:30. And then we'll be back Monday to talk about the newest information. So for Andre Johnson Jr., I'm Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.